Well, it's a pleasure, obviously, for me to be here. I think my first visit to the foundation was in 2004. So it's a very long time. At the time, the mansion wasn't even finished, so that wasn't a space that was available to us. And I'm sure all of you have your special moments, and it is a very special place. So I'm very pleased to be able to start the session on women's health. And at one level, I'm kind of disappointed that my first topic is something to do narrowly with women's reproductive health, as though women are only their reproductive organs. And so I'm going to actually offer up a few comments that have nothing to do directly with women's reproduction to show that I actually think other topics are important. I chose this, however, because I worked on this over a dozen years ago, and it's resurfaced. Why? Because the numbers have gone ridiculously high as a result of the pandemic. And so it was interesting to me to try to go back and look at what's happened and what's different. So, and why do we need a song? Because I think of, I don't know very much about country music. So I think about country music as everything like, I lost my dog, I lost my car, I lost my truck, I lost my woman, I lost my whatever. And I think there's a lot of stories of loss around egg freezing. So anyhow, that's why we have that particular theme. Okay, I'm going to make this work. The old-fashioned way? Non, Sans, peux m'aider? Qu'est-ce que j'ai fait?
Normalement, c'est bon. Ok. Ouais, non, c'est bon.
Okay, so the first point I wanted to make is that obviously women are much more than their reproductive organs, and that we should remember that in the context of all that we do. And so this is just an example of some of the topics that I hope might actually come up in the panel discussion we could have, because I think all of the panelists have expertise that goes beyond their individual presentation. So it is to say that what I've just said is interestingly widely recognized. And so it'll constantly show up in reports, right? That women are much more than their reproductive organs. And here's a summary of this Women's Health Innovation Opportunity. It talks about female-specific health conditions. It talks about conditions that affect women disproportionately, conditions that affect women differently, conditions that are understudied and under-resourced. And this is a relatively, recent report. I'm thinking, how come we have to still say this in 2023? And I say this as somebody who's been working in the field of bioethics since the 1980s. And yet it is still something that resurfaces. Why? Because we tend to forget that women have lots of other parts to their bodies. And I think one of the things that's interesting is already, even in that context, we're seeing a critique of a 2023 report saying we're still not paying attention to sort of these fundamental priorities. So one of the things I wanted to do before I turn to my topic, which is, why we need a country song for women who freeze their eggs, is to actually just share with you some work that I did over a lifetime, which was narrowly on the argument that women should be included in research, which I actually think is a pretty basic thing. And the comment there was that if you actually believe that research is how we do knowledge production, and it's how we learn to look after people's healthcare, why would you not want to include women in research? Recognizing that their bodies are different, you might actually learn something different, and therefore you'd be able to offer them better healthcare. And what is it that you were doing by saying they couldn't be involved? So I was actually involved in the writing of what turned out to be the first set of research guidelines in Canada, the TCPS 1998, and I was pregnant at the time. And the point I want to make is that I missed the last meeting, and the whole section on involving women in research was gone when I came back. I literally cried. I remember Doug Kinsella, who was a very important person at the time, who passed away shortly thereafter, coming to me when I came back to the meeting to warn me that the whole section on women in research had just disappeared. It's something that I continue to work on, and this is the most recent version, and I'm putting it up here because I still think of it as a failure. And this is in a context where those guidelines have been revised about 4 times since 1998. And in each case, I've gone in and I've argued the starting assumption is women should be involved, and then maybe you have caveats as to narrow conditions under which they might be excluded. And yet that's not the position you have. Your starting assumption is they shouldn't be inappropriately excluded. Well, there's a very different thing between they should be appropriately included versus they shouldn't be inappropriately excluded. That's 2022, still fighting the good fight, still losing. Many of you may have noticed I'm now emerita, and so I actually celebrate my losses because I think it's really important that somebody else pick up where some of us have not been successful, to say there's still important work to be done. And I'm just putting this up here to say that I not only did this in the context of the importance of involving women in research, but the importance of involving pregnant women in research and making the same point. If you want to offer them good health care, you need to do the work that generates the knowledge on the basis of which we can do that. Now, interestingly, here something different happened. And again, I wasn't on this committee, but I was weighing in and consulting at different moments in time. And I think they've got it right. Women must be included in health-related research unless there are good scientific reasons to exclude them. That's where we need to get to. And so the interesting thing is that maybe we've gotten there internationally and maybe not in our individual countries. So this is an invitation for you to go back and to look and see what's happening in your space, in your jurisdiction. Have they made this change? Are you at a point where the assumption is you include women in research in order to generate the knowledge you need to offer them good health care? Concerns about women continue to be the focus of my work, no matter what topic I take on. This is a book I published during the pandemic on heritable human genome editing called Altered Inheritance. And I think one of the unique contributions in that book is to name this as research involving women. Because when you look at heritable human genome editing, everybody's interested in the tissues, right? The eggs, the sperm, the embryos that are being created and the offspring that might come. But you have to put these little things into women and women's bodies. And there wasn't really a frame of reference around human genome editing as being something that intersects with women as health research subjects. Anyhow, all of that is just to say, by way of introduction, I talk about a lot of things other than women's reproduction, but this is the focus of today's talk. So why do we need a country song about women who freeze their eggs? And I've already sort of presaged that by saying we've seen a huge increase after the pandemic. And so 2012 is often the starting point because that's the point at which it's no longer got the research designation. It's in theory moved into clinical practice. But what we see is a slow increase over the years, and then in 2020, a huge trajectory upwards, and I predict that that's going to continue. Now, there's many hypotheses as to why that has happened, and I don't know that anybody's actually done the empirical work to answer the question, the why, but these are some of the things that have been suggested. And by and large, it's people were isolated. They didn't have new relationships. They were continuing to age. They were worried about their reproduction. They had time to think. They had money to spend. There's all kinds of things that might be true, but you actually need to do some research to find out. And you need to do that, especially in this area, because this is an area in which a lot of assumptions have been made that when people go and actually do the empirical work, it turns out to be incorrect. So in the abstract, and I do say in the abstract because of the way in which the technology has developed, egg freezing offers a number of very positive opportunities. So one of them, obviously, is in the context for people who have concerns about the ethics of freezing embryos because they might be humans, depending on your perspective, potential humans, acorns, as we please. This would obviate those kinds of ethical issues because you're not actually freezing an embryo, you're freezing an egg. For people who have fertility challenges as a result of certain kinds of health challenges, that might also be an important opportunity for them. And so I think what I want to say is that in a context where people think of this as a medical intervention for infertility, there are a number of reasons why people would want to move forward with that. But really where we see the shift and the numbers is around what has taken the title of social egg freezing. And this is one of the places where I want to say that once people did empirical research, the things people had said turned out not to be true. So in the early 2010s, what this was supposed to be was so that women could, carry on and have their careers, and that's what was motivating women, that they needed to stay in the workforce in order not to hit the glass ceiling, and they would have their children later. That's only what less than 20% of people identify as the reason for thinking about egg freezing. And so what then becomes interesting is, where are you seeing the high numbers, right? I wanted to have a backup plan for my fertility decline. So that's a new way of actually thinking about the body and aging and reproduction. And it's a lot of stuff about the biological clock, but it's the pressure about having children. And one of the things that's interesting to me is that at least the young women that I speak with, they're not actually sure they want children at all. And that's very different from a lot of the assumptions that were driving the reproductive fertility industry for a very long time. And one of the things that I find quite interesting is this idea, and I think this is mostly in North America, but it may be in other parts of the world, that this would be sort of an appropriate graduation gift for your, high school student, right? We'll just give you a little package of egg freezing. And it's in a context where I think it kind of trivializes the kind of education that you actually want around people's reproductive capacities, intentions, the world in which we live. But I mean, this is happening quite seriously. So anyhow, I started thinking about this in terms of loss, country music, everything that goes wrong. And I know nothing about country music. I want to say that really clearly. And so I had to do some research about country music. And in that context, I learned what are the great themes that sort of recur. And I thought this was great. It's all over. It's not working out. Love and devotion and the right way to live. Now, isn't that perfect for egg freezing? Okay, so anyhow, I took each of these themes and now I'm just going to take you through it very quickly without anything that I consider in-depth analysis. It's really not just for entertainment, but teasers so that we can have an interesting conversation. It's all over. One of the things that gets said here is that this is going to be a game changer. It's not going to be all over because I'm going to have these eggs and I'm going to keep them aside. They're going to address the problem of the biological clock. And I just wanted to share with you some of the language you find in some of these articles. A revolution in the way women age. No, you're aging the same old way. Sorry. A reproductive backstop. And I think that's a really interesting thing, as though reproduction is just the tissue, right? That's not reproduction, right? It's many other things, and on and on. The fertility insurance policy, I think, is fascinating because that term was used actually very early. And if so, it's an insurance policy you're very unlikely to collect on. And then people turn that around and say, well, yeah, but that's how all insurance policies work. And I think about that whole industry and how much money gets given to insurance companies that nobody ever collects on. It's not working out. And that's just really to sort of say that for some people, the thought that it's not working out is in the context of maybe having a relationship with a person with whom you'd like to reproduce, for example. But it's not working out really in many respects in terms of what people think the technology is going to be about. And it's actually quite onerous. And it's onerous from the beginning in terms of the collection and retrieval of eggs. But it's also onerous in that you're now committing to an IVF pregnancy as opposed to a natural pregnancy. And there's all kinds of challenges that even will come with a healthy pregnancy. And so it's not just about, can I collect eggs today, freeze them for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? It's a whole trajectory and commitment. One of the things that I also wanted to say with the not working out part is the pricing. And because a lot of that focuses on the $10,000 to $12,000 to $15,000 it takes to do the initial egg retrieval. But depending on your age, you may need 4 egg retrievals. That's turning out to be a number, depending on if you're close to your 40s when you choose to do this. But that's just the beginning of the whack of money that you're going to have to commit. And I think, again, there's not a long sort of set of conversations about that. Love and devotion. I just wanted to say that because early on, there was this idea, as I said, that this was about being able to continue in the workplace. And what women are basically saying is, no, we actually don't have a partner, or we have a partner, but they're actually not parenting material. And I think that that's a really important thing to think about. And so people are actually, even in this context, freezing their eggs, but they're actually looking for love. They're looking for a relationship. And they're wanting to hold on to some possibility that they may not find it early. And I just have to say, as a quick aside, I think it's because women are getting smarter and smarter. I'm saying that entre guillemets. And so they're actually intimidating. And that's why a lot of young women are actually not having as the kind of success that they might otherwise have had. Now that I'm saying partly in jest, but again, partly in terms of talking with young people, especially young people in STEM. They literally talk about going out on a relationship and they're with this male who's telling them how big and important they are. And they say, yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do that. And all of a sudden the male's like, I'm not interested. Right. And so I think there's something interesting happening in terms of relationships in general, but also women's expectations, both in terms of the workplace and in terms of relationships. I actually do believe, and this was what I did write in the early days of this technology, it's to say we need to do many more things if we actually really are saying that we care about having children. It's not about freezing eggs and it's not about IVF. It's actually about making important cultural and structural changes. And those changes are not just in the workplace, they're in relationships and understandings about who's going to take responsibility for what. The last theme, the right way to live. I think one of the things that's actually interesting is that this makes a huge assumption that what matters most is genetically related children. And that's something that I have called into question in all the work that I've done around assisted human reproduction. We are in trouble if we go down this path of reifying the gene. I think we've made lots of progress over the years in terms of understanding there are multiple ways of making families, multiple ways of loving and caring for each other. And if we continue to insist upon that, we're actually undermining the successes that we've had in terms of understanding family making in a broader and more inclusive way. And I think the other thing we need to be able to pay attention to here is the realities that very few patients return for their eggs. And so what are we really doing? We're not actually backstopping any kind of fertility project. What we're doing is we're creating huge, massive biobanks. And I think we need to think very carefully about what it is we think is going to happen with those biobanks and where we're going to have to make some decisions or not. And because we live in a world of AI, guess what I did? You guessed it. I have a country song to share with you, and I'm hoping it's going to play.
In a small town, there's a woman at the heart of the freeze. She's got a fire burning, but her heart's in a squeeze. Feminist in her 50s, she's got her own plans. With a frozen egg, she's got life in her hands. But now climate change is creeping up the Arctic's door, thawing out her dreams. What's this world looking for? She needs a baby, but the Antarctic bird flu's in the way. 50 years young, she wonders if it's too late to play. Oh, she's a frozen flame, burning in the winter's embrace. A modern tale, a woman with a heart of grace, searching for answers in a world that's cold and cruel. Will she find her sunshine, or will it all be too cruel?
Thank you very much.